The text popped up on my phone while I was standing in my kitchen, still holding the pen I had been using to sign the final papers for my villa in Italy. "We just want a quiet holiday with your sister's family this year." That's what my parents sent me. No emoji, no warmth, no "we're proud of you, Savannah." Just a plain, dismissive line, followed by the silence of a conversation that wasn't even worth their time to continue. I stared at it, my chest tightening. My parents, Ellen and Martin Cole, had never been cruel in the traditional sense, but their indifference had always cut deeper than anger ever could. And as usual, their message wasn't just about what they wanted, it was about what they didn't want. They didn't want me. Not my villa, not my idea, not me. I tapped back one word: enjoy. Then I tossed my phone onto the counter, the screen lighting up the shadows of my kitchen, mocking me with its silence. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. But before I explain what I did next, you need to understand who the players in this story are. Because trust me, this wasn't just about a holiday. This was about years of family dynamics that had left me bruised, overlooked, and constantly measured against someone else's perfect life. Let's start with my parents. My mother, Ellen, is the kind of woman who thrives on appearances. If the house looks perfect, if the neighbors admire her, if the grandchildren smile in matching sweaters, then life is good. My father, Martin, is quieter, but not in a comforting way. His silence is agreement, his approval given almost exclusively to my sister, Rachel Cole Harper, my older sister, the golden child. At 35, Rachel has the life my parents worship: a solid marriage, 2 picture-perfect kids, a white picket fence suburban home just 20 minutes from where we grew up. To my parents, Rachel represents stability, family, tradition. To me, she represents the shadow I could never escape. Her husband, Daniel, is charming enough in public, but I always saw the cracks, the way his compliments carried a hidden sting, the way his eyes narrowed when Rachel wasn't looking. Their kids, Ethan and Lily, are innocent in all of this. They're sweet, they're funny, and they don't deserve to be pawns in the silent rivalry between their mom and their aunt. And then there's me, Savannah Cole, 32. I moved out of our small town at 22 and built a career in interior design in New York City. It wasn't easy. It wasn't glamorous at first, but after a decade of relentless work, I saved enough to buy my dream, a villa on Lake Como. A place that finally felt like mine, not theirs, not Rachel's, mine. So when I first told my parents about hosting Christmas in Italy, I thought, just maybe, they'd see me differently. I thought they'd look at the photos of my villa, the view of the lake, the carefully chosen furniture, and they'd finally say, "Savannah, we're proud of you." Instead, they chose Rachel again. "We just want a quiet holiday with your sister's family this year." The irony burned me. My parents wanted quiet? With Rachel's 2 kids bouncing off the walls, Daniel drinking too much wine, and Ellen orchestrating the whole evening like a stage play. Quiet? Please. But fine. They wanted quiet? They could have it. What they didn't know, what they could never have imagined, was that my villa was about to host the loudest, most unforgettable holiday of their lives. Because I had already been planning something different, and once I hit post on Facebook, there would be no going back. The photos, the videos, the laughter that would spill across the screen, they'd see it all. And when their phones started blowing up with notifications from friends, from relatives, from people they desperately wanted to impress, well, that would just be the beginning. But the worst part wasn't the calls, the texts, or even the embarrassment. The worst part was the comment. The one line under my post that changed everything. The one that cut deeper than my parents' rejection ever had. And I'll tell you exactly what it said. When I look back on it now, I realize the text from my parents wasn't just about one Christmas. It was about years of feeling like I was living on the outside of my own family, pressing my face against the glass while Rachel enjoyed the warmth inside. I grew up in a small town in North Carolina, in a house where everything revolved around appearances. My mother, Ellen, believed in perfect lawns, iron tablecloths, and Christmas cards that could have been advertisements. She lived for the approval of others, for the whispers at church that she was raising such a lovely family. My father, Martin, wasn't as loud about it, but he reinforced it in his quiet way, by nodding approvingly when Rachel got straight A's, by beaming when she made captain of the cheer squad, by giving her away at her wedding with tears in his eyes. And me? I was the younger daughter with bigger dreams than our town could hold. I wasn't the star athlete. I wasn't the perfect homemaker. I was the one who left. At 22, I packed up my old Honda Civic, drove to New York City, and told myself I'd prove them wrong. I'd make something of myself, even if they didn't believe in me. It wasn't easy. Those first years in the city were brutal. I worked as a receptionist during the day, waited tables at night, and took every freelance design job I could find on Craigslist. There were weeks when I lived on peanut butter sandwiches, months when my rent was late, and nights when I lay awake wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. But slowly, painfully, things began to change. One client led to another. My portfolio grew. And after 10 years of hustling, saving, and refusing to quit, I bought my dream, a villa overlooking Lake Como, Italy. First time I unlocked the heavy wooden door and stepped inside, I cried. Not because it was grand, it was, but because it was mine. Every tile, every beam, every view of the glittering lake felt like proof that I had done it. I had built a life on my own terms, and yet when I called my parents to share the news, their reactions were muted. "That's nice, Savannah," my mother said, as if I'd told her I'd bought a new sofa. My father made a low sound of acknowledgement and then changed the subject to how Ethan, my sister's son, had just made the travel soccer team. That was my place in the family, the background character in someone else's story. Rachel, of course, played the lead role. She married young, at 24, to Daniel Harper, the kind of man who looked good in Christmas photos but whose smile never quite reached his eyes. They bought a charming colonial-style house not far from our parents. They had 2 kids, Ethan, now 10, and Lily, 7, both sweet and full of energy. My parents were ecstatic. Suddenly, Rachel's life was the yardstick against which all others were measured. At family gatherings, the conversations always circled back to her. Rachel made the best turkey this year. Daniel's promotion at the firm is such a blessing. The kids are growing up so fast, aren't they? Meanwhile, I was the visitor from New York, the one who never stayed long, the one without a husband or children to fill the photo albums. My achievements, my projects featured in design magazines, my growing client list, never seemed to count. I remember one Thanksgiving sitting at the table while my mom beamed at Rachel. She turned to me and said, "Savannah, you really should think about slowing down and finding someone. You don't want to end up alone." The words hit me harder than she realized. My success wasn't even on her radar. To her, I was unfinished. So when I finally told them about hosting Christmas in Italy, I thought maybe, just maybe, things would be different. I imagined them walking through the villa, seeing the decorated tree by the tall windows, hearing the laughter of family gathered around a long wooden table. I pictured my father pulling me aside and saying, "You've really built something, Savannah." I pictured my mother posting photos of the villa online with the pride she usually reserved for Rachel's kids. Instead, I got that text. "We just want a quiet holiday with your sister's family this year." Quiet. That word echoed in my chest like a hollow bell. They didn't want Italy, they didn't want me. They wanted the same thing they'd always wanted, Rachel. And here's the truth. In that moment, I wasn't just disappointed. I was angry. Years of being overlooked, minimized, and compared came crashing down. And anger has a way of pushing you to do things you never thought you'd do. Because this holiday wouldn't be quiet. Not at all. When I put my phone down after reading my parents' text, I stood in the middle of my villa's kitchen, staring out the wide glass doors at Lake Como glittering in the winter sun. It should have been a moment of peace. I had worked my whole life for this, yet all I felt was the sharp sting of being dismissed. Again. For 32 years, my parents had made it clear where I ranked in our family. Rachel was the star, the one who carried on their vision of family perfection. I was the second act, tolerated but never celebrated. But this Christmas, this was supposed to be my moment, my chance to finally bring everyone together under my roof, my chance to show them that I wasn't the reckless daughter who'd run off to New York. I was someone who had built something worth being proud of, and with one short text, they took it away. The hurt turned to fire. If they didn't want to see what I had built, fine. But I wasn't going to spend the holidays sulking while Rachel hosted her quiet Christmas, like she always did. Number. This time, I'd create my own version of family. That's when I started scrolling through my contacts. First was Uncle Dean, my dad's younger brother. He was always the life of the party, the uncle who brought sparklers to 4th of July and told the best stories about sneaking out of the house as a teenager. Dean had always been the one person in the family who saw me, who encouraged my independence instead of criticizing it. When I called him and told him about the villa, he laughed so loudly I had to hold the phone away. "Savannah, I've been waiting for an excuse to escape Indiana in December. Count us in." His wife, Marissa, was equally thrilled. She loved wine tastings and European markets, and Italy was her dream. Next, I texted my cousin Chloe, their daughter. At 28, she was more like a sister to me than Rachel ever was. She'd been the one who sent me late-night messages during my broke New York years, cheering me on when I doubted myself. Chloe replied instantly, "Say less. I'm packing my bags." Then came Grandpa Henry. My grandmother had passed 3 years ago, and since then he'd been lonelier, quieter. My parents often left him with scraps of attention while they fussed over Rachel's kids. But I remembered him as the man who taught me how to ride a bike, who slipped me candy at church, who whispered, "Don't let anyone dim your fire." When I invited him, his voice cracked. "Lake Como? Savannah, that sounds like a dream. Thank you for thinking of me." Each yes I received filled me with a mix of excitement and defiance. This wasn't just a gathering, it was a statement. I was creating the holiday my parents didn't believe I could, and I didn't stop there. A few more cousins, a college friend who had become like family, even Chloe's fiancé, who I hadn't met yet, all were welcome. My villa wasn't just big enough, it was perfect for it. As I confirmed flights and planned guest rooms, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Control. For once, I wasn't begging for a seat at Rachel's table. I was building my own table, and everyone else was excited to join me. But underneath the thrill was a darker undercurrent. What would my parents think when the photos surfaced? I imagined my mother's tight smile cracking when friends tagged her under my posts. I pictured my father's silence, this time not as dismissal, but as stunned disapproval. A part of me wanted them to feel it, to feel the same exclusion they had given me all these years. Still, there was another part of me that hoped, just maybe, they'd see what they were missing and finally acknowledge me. That hope was the most dangerous part. I threw myself into preparations. I ordered wreaths, candles, and imported ornaments from Florence. I spent hours perfecting a Christmas menu: roasted duck with rosemary potatoes, chestnut soup, handmade tiramisu. I wanted every detail to shimmer. Not just for me, but for everyone who had chosen to be there. The villa buzzed with anticipation as the first guests arrived. Suitcases rolled across marble floors, hugs filled the air, and laughter bounced off the walls. My heart swelled. This was what Christmas should feel like: warm, loud, alive. But as I snapped photos of Chloe helping Grandpa Henry onto the balcony, of Uncle Dean pouring wine, of Marissa marveling at the view, a thought lingered in the back of my mind. My parents would see all of this, and they wouldn't be able to look away. The first night everyone arrived at the villa, it felt like stepping into the Christmas I had always wanted, but never had. The house, usually quiet and echoing with my own footsteps, suddenly came alive with voices, laughter, and the shuffle of suitcases being dragged across the polished floor. Chloe bounded through the front door first, arms spread wide. "Savannah! Oh my God, this place is insane. You live here?" she said, dropping her bags to hug me. Her excitement was contagious, the kind of reaction I had secretly hoped for when I bought the villa. Behind her came Uncle Dean and Marissa, wheeling 2 oversized suitcases and already debating which of them had packed too much. Grandpa Henry followed slowly, leaning on his cane, but his eyes lit up when he saw the view of the lake through the glass doors. He whispered, "Your grandmother would have loved this." My chest tightened, a mixture of pride and sadness, but mostly gratitude that he was there. As more guests trickled in, I guided them to their rooms, each one carefully decorated with festive touches. Pine garlands above the beds, small stockings on the doors, handwritten notes welcoming them. I wanted them to feel treasured, to know this wasn't just a holiday. It was a celebration of family, the kind I'd always longed for. The villa filled with energy quickly. Chloe unpacked Bluetooth speakers and played holiday playlists. Marissa immediately claimed the kitchen, insisting she'd help me cook. Uncle Dean poured everyone glasses of Prosecco, raising his voice in mock ceremony. To Savannah, the Queen of Como. Everyone clinked glasses, cheering, and for a brief moment I let myself bask in it. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about joy. This was about sending a message. I could have kept the holiday private, let it be our little secret gathering by the lake, but that wasn't enough. I needed my parents to see it, to feel it, to realize what they had chosen to miss. So after the first dinner, roasted duck, chestnut soup, tiramisu, I pulled out my phone. The long wooden table glowed with candlelight, everyone laughing and leaning into each other, wine glasses raised mid-toast. It was perfect, cinematic even, exactly the kind of photo my mother would have killed to post if she had hosted. I snapped the picture and hesitated for only a second before uploading it to Facebook with the caption, "Christmas at the Villa, family, laughter, and love." Couldn't be more grateful. Almost immediately, the likes began to climb. Comments rolled in from friends back in New York, college classmates, even distant cousins. "This looks like a dream. Savannah, you're living the life." Lake Como? Incredible. I smiled, but my chest tightened with anticipation. I knew the moment my parents saw it, the storm would begin, and I didn't stop at one post. The next day, I uploaded a video of Chloe and Grandpa Henry singing Christmas carols by the fire. Later, I shared a photo of everyone bundled up on a boat ride across the lake, the mountains rising behind us like something out of a postcard. Each post was deliberate, each caption written with warmth, but underneath it was a quiet defiance. This was my family. This was my Christmas. As the days passed, the villa transformed into a hub of celebration. We hosted wine tastings, cooked elaborate meals, and filled the air with carols and laughter. People teased me for snapping so many photos, but they posed anyway, happy to be part of it. Still, in quieter moments, when I was alone in my room or walking along the balcony overlooking the lake, I wondered if I was making a mistake. I pictured my mother's face tightening when she saw the posts, my father's jaw clenching in silence. Would they be angry? Embarrassed? Or would they just brush it off the way they always brushed me off? But then I'd hear Chloe's laughter echoing from the kitchen, or see Grandpa Henry napping peacefully by the fire, and my doubt faded. For once, I was creating something beautiful, something my parents couldn't ignore. And then it happened. On the third night, while we sat around the fireplace with mugs of hot cocoa, my phone buzzed with notification after notification. My posts had reached beyond my circle. Family, friends, neighbors from our hometown, even church members were tagging my parents in the comments. One said, "Ellen, isn't this your daughter's villa? Why aren't you there?" Another, "Martin, you must be so proud of Savannah." I stared at my phone, my heart racing. It had begun. The messages I'd been waiting for, the ones I knew would force my parents to see me, were flooding in. Their quiet holiday with Rachel was about to collide with the noisy, dazzling celebration in Italy. I put my phone face down on the table and smiled tightly, raising my mug as if nothing had happened. Inside, I knew there was no turning back. It started as a trickle. Just a few extra likes, a handful of comments under the Christmas photos I had posted. But by the third day, it had turned into a flood. My notifications wouldn't stop buzzing. At first, it was flattering. Distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years commented things like, "Wow, Savannah, this looks magical." And "Italy at Christmas? You're living the dream." Friends from New York sent heart emojis and messages about how proud they were of me. But mixed into the excitement were the tags, the constant, relentless tags. "Ellen, look at this. Your daughter's villa is incredible. Martin, you must be bursting with pride. Rachel, how come you're not there?" Every time someone tagged my parents or my sister, my chest tightened. I had wanted them to notice, but I hadn't anticipated the intensity. It wasn't just a few people. It was everyone. The posts had become a topic of conversation, a public spectacle that my parents could no longer ignore. I pictured them sitting in Rachel's perfect living room, my mother scrolling through Facebook, her face frozen in that polite smile she wore when something bothered her. My father would sit silently in his armchair, eyes narrowing with every new notification. Rachel would hover nearby, maybe trying to dismiss it, maybe secretly seething. And then came the comment. I was in the living room of the villa, surrounded by warmth and laughter. Chloe and her fiancé were decorating gingerbread houses at the table, Grandpa Henry was nodding off by the fire, and Uncle Dean was telling a story that had everyone in stitches. My phone buzzed again, and without thinking, I picked it up. There it was. A comment under my most recent post, the one of us clinking glasses on the balcony with Lake Como glittering in the background, from Daniel Harper, my sister's husband. Looks like the whole family's there, except the ones who've always been there for you, Savannah. Maybe that tells you something. I read it twice, my eyes blurring. My stomach dropped as if the floor had been ripped out from under me. The room around me seemed to fade. The laughter, the music, the glow of the fire, all of it dulled to a low hum. I stared at the words on the screen, the weight of them pressing down harder with every second. Except the ones who've always been there for you. It was a knife disguised as a sentence. Daniel hadn't just commented. He had broadcast to everyone watching that my parents' absence wasn't an oversight. It was a choice. And worse, he framed it as my fault, as if I had been the problem all along. The notifications kept rolling in. Reactions, shocked emojis, whispers from relatives. Did you see what Daniel wrote? That was harsh. Oh, wow. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. Chloe leaned over my shoulder, curious. When she read the comment, her face twisted with anger. Are you kidding me? He actually wrote that? In public? Uncle Dean caught the tone of her voice. What happened? He asked. I quickly locked my phone, tucking it under a napkin, but it was too late. The mood in the room shifted, curiosity buzzing like static in the air. I forced a smile, insisting it was nothing, but my insides were unraveling. Because the truth was, Daniel's words cut deeper than anything my parents had said or hadn't said all these years. They carried an authority, a finality, as if he was the spokesperson for my family. And by leaving that comment, he made sure everyone else saw me the way my parents did, the outsider. Later that night, when everyone else had gone to bed, I sat alone by the fire, the comment glowing on my phone screen. Part of me wanted to delete the post, to erase the whole thing and pretend none of it had happened, but the damage was already done. Screenshots had been taken. The ripple was spreading. For the first time since this whole plan began, I questioned myself. Had I set myself up for this? By flaunting my holiday online, had I given Daniel, and by extension Rachel and my parents, the perfect stage to humiliate me? I set the phone down, my hands trembling. I had wanted attention, recognition, pride. What I got instead was public humiliation. And the cruelest part was that the person delivering the final blow wasn't even my mother or father. It was Rachel's husband, the one person who had always stood just outside the spotlight, but still held the power to dim mine completely. The morning after Daniel's comment, the villa was quiet in a way it hadn't been since everyone arrived. The laughter, the music, the clinking glasses, all of it had been replaced by the soft hum of the heater and the faint sound of water lapping against the lake outside. I slipped out onto the balcony with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The cold air stung my skin, but I welcomed it. My phone was heavy in my hand, the screen still showing the comment that had kept me awake all night. Looks like the whole family's there, except the ones who've always been there for you, Savannah. Maybe that tells you something. The words scrolled across my mind again and again. It didn't matter how many times I read them. They carried the same sting. Behind me, the villa began to stir. I heard Marissa moving around in the kitchen, Chloe humming softly as she helped Grandpa Henry with his morning coffee. Life went on, and everyone else seemed content. But inside me, a storm was brewing. I thought back to why I'd planned all this in the first place. It wasn't just about hosting Christmas. It was about proving something. To my parents, to Rachel, maybe even to myself. I wanted recognition. I wanted to show them that I was worthy of love, pride, and belonging. But Daniel's comment had made something painfully clear. No matter how beautiful my villa was, no matter how perfect the holiday I planned, my parents had already chosen where they stood, and it wasn't with me. That realization was both crushing and liberating. Later that day, Chloe found me sitting by the lake, staring at the water. She sat beside me, her breath clouding in the cold air. "You're not going to let him win, are you?" she asked. I shook my head, though I wasn't sure what winning even meant anymore. "He didn't just write a comment, Chloe. He told the world what my parents think of me, and they didn't correct him. That's the part that hurts." She put her hand over mine. "Then maybe it's time to stop waiting for them to." Her words hit me harder than Daniel's ever could, because they were true. I had spent years chasing their approval, thinking that if I just worked harder, achieved more, built something spectacular, they'd finally see me. But approval that has to be begged for isn't love. That night, I made a choice. I stopped checking the comments. I stopped waiting for a call from my parents that would never come. Instead, I focused on the people who had chosen to be there with me. We spent the rest of the holiday making memories, late-night karaoke, card games that went on for hours, Grandpa Henry telling stories about my grandmother that made us laugh and cry at the same time. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged. Not because my parents were there, but because the people who were there wanted to be. On Christmas Eve, I raised a glass at dinner and looked around the table. "Thank you all for coming," I said, my voice catching slightly. This year, I realized something. Family isn't just who you're born to, it's who shows up for you. And all of you showed up. That means more than you'll ever know. The clinking of glasses that followed wasn't just noise. It was a chorus of affirmation, a reminder that love doesn't always look the way we expect it to. When everyone left after New Year's, the villa felt quiet again, but it wasn't the same kind of quiet as before. It wasn't loneliness, it was peace. I took one last look at Daniel's comment before I archived the post. I didn't delete it. I didn't need to. The people who mattered had seen the truth. Not the words of someone trying to wound me, but the joy and love captured in every photo. Standing on the balcony as the sun set over Lake Como, I made myself a promise. I wouldn't keep chasing a version of family that didn't exist. I wouldn't let their silence define my worth. Because the real lesson of that holiday was simple but life-changing. Sometimes the family you're born into will never see you for who you are. But the family you build, the ones who celebrate you without conditions, that's the one that saves you. And that was the Christmas that changed everything. I thought I needed my parents' approval to feel complete, but what I learned is that family isn't defined by who rejects you. It's defined by who chooses to show up for you, love you, and stand by your side. If this story connected with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever felt like the outsider in your own family? Or have you found a chosen family that makes you feel whole? Share your experience down in the comments. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story. Your support helps me keep bringing you more real, emotional, and powerful stories just like this one. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, take care of yourself and never forget, you are worthy of love just as you are. As